You remind me, I was speaking to my wife, Chaya's grandmother, a while back, and she got married right after the war. In fact, she was a Holocaust survivor, she was from Hungary, and she met her husband, who was from Poland. She was a nurse, and he was in hospital after the war, very sick and they met each other and got married. None of them had parents, obviously. And she was describing how they prepared for the wedding.
You are listening to the JP Show,
where we discuss the issues you care about from a Jewish perspective.
I am Rabbi G,
I am Rabbi Levi,
and we hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome back, everyone, to another JP Show. The weeks are rolling on. How you doing, Rabbi Levi?
Good, good. It's a short term this term, it's almost
very,
the
very
summer.
short term, and we've got to just get everything in. It's good, and it's busy. It's nice. Apologies, of course, that we're recording this a day late. I was actually in Melbourne on Sunday and Monday at a wedding, and it was beautiful, and back ready to go. So here we are.
Yeah.
Didn't want to miss a week, so a day late, but it's still this week.
Last week we spoke about the elections. Since then, the elections, of course, have happened, which we're not going to talk about it this week. Don't worry. I just has nothing to do with the topic we're going to talk about. But I just saw, maybe we should dedicate a different podcast to this. But I saw this week someone was being interviewed, a psychologist. She called herself a psychologist. I mean, it's interesting. And she was saying anyone who has family members who voted for a particular candidate, you shouldn't celebrate Thanksgiving with them. You shouldn't talk to them. It's just interesting how crazy, you can have difference of opinion, but they're your family. You can still celebrate holidays with
Yeah,
them.
no, it's very, very sad.
So it's been a very interesting week. But anyway,
At my Shabbat table this past Friday night, I had a bit of a crowd, some younger people. I sensed right away that there's different viewpoints. So without telling them what my viewpoint was, I just said, look, we actually don't talk politics at the Shabbat table.
that's right.
That's the care of that, and it was beautiful. But so let's not talk politics today. Maybe we
That's
can
right.
talk about this topic at a different time. But yeah, we're not
Now
making...
yeah, exactly. We'll talk about something totally different. So you were in Melbourne, you mentioned, at a wedding.
Yep.
You weren't the officiating rabbi this time.
No.
You went as a guest and you're a rabbi of the family, maybe not the rabbi. You're very
Just
close to the
close,
family,
but not
right,
yet.
and the groom and everyone. Um, but you have officiated many weddings over your time. As
True.
I'm not going to call it a career because I don't think you look at it as a career. It's
Right.
your mission, your shlichut, as we call it. So what's that? I thought we would talk about that a little bit. What's it like being an officiating rabbi, from the other side? Um,
What do you mean from the other side? I mean,
Meaning to say, obviously everyone sees you show up to a chuppah, you lead it, make a blessing. Well, actually, let's actually start with that because actually someone asked me that um, last week, just out of interest. What is the role of an officiating rabbi? So let me just clarify first. What does that actually mean?
that's a good question. So actually, well, it depends how you translate officiating rabbi. So the way I translate it, or the way, so there's something in Hebrew called Mesader Kiddushin,
Yeah,
which means the officiating rabbi, but that just means that it's the person who makes the first two blessings and organizes the groom to give the bride a ring and to be what we call Mekadesha, which means to actually marry her. The handing over the ring is actually a part of the form of the marriage, and that's actually technically makes them halachically now a married couple, right?
yeah,
Um, Now, in most communities, or especially in communities, I should say, that's just the end part. Like the officiating rabbi is really the one to prepare the bride and groom for the wedding, to learn with them, to go through the whole thing, and to coordinate traffic and to really sort of make sure that it's all running according to our tradition, right? So he might not make the other blessings under the chuppah, but he's the one in charge, kind of thing, right?
right.
Um, and it's important to have one person that's driving it, right? It might even be that rabbi doesn't speak under the chuppah or anything, but it's the one that's the driver in,
Mm.
in in the driver's seat. Often I've had cases where people come to me and say, "Look, we'd like you and so to officiate the wedding." So I told them, no, there's no such thing as me and so. I'm happy not to be the officiating rabbi. It's not a problem. I love you guys. I'll be there with you. I'll celebrate with you. But just it just needs one person to drive traffic.
Right.
So pick a rabbi and happy to be involved, but pick a rabbi and everything should go through that rabbi.
Mm.
Um, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So everyone sort of sees that the rabbi comes and sometimes speaks and as you say, directed and all that. But what actually goes into that process? Let me sort of describe that process a little bit. What do you actually do with the bride and groom before? What do you, you always have a connection to them? Do you sometimes get like random people just coming and asking you to marry them?
So I have had random people, but the process looks very similar. In other words, like this. So when I say random people, it's normally someone that I know, at least the bride or the groom, or at least some of the parents, for whatever reason they've asked me to do it. Um, so the steps, the way I do it is bride and groom, and this I think is important for people to understand because it's important to understand what goes into a wedding, right? The chuppah is not just a few blessings; it's a foundation for life. It's really spiritually, it's and halachically, it's the coming together of the two neshama, the two souls, and it's really, really important that it's done properly and it's done spiritually properly, halachically properly, and so on. So my thing is that when someone calls me, can you do a wedding? My first thing is I need to meet with the bride and groom. Now, sometimes the bride and groom they make a meeting with me to ask me, but so I meet with the bride and groom. Now, there's all kinds of people. It's been very religious people and very often not religious people at all. People, more secular people. So I like in the first session just to say, listen, before I agree, I just want you to know more or less briefly what the process entails, like what needs to happen, what can't happen, what I'm not prepared to do, and so on and so forth.
Mm.
Um, and then we start. So what it is involved, I do three parts. I make sure I don't do all the learning with them myself always, but um, I do three parts. One is to learn, we spend a number of sessions with the bride and groom. One is to learn about what the chuppah day looks like, what the meaning behind everything is, the spirituality behind everything, the basic halachot, and so on. Part two is to learn about mikveh and family purity and to explain to them the beauty. And then for that we do a bit of separately bride and groom. Um, and then I also
Meaning you'll get a woman to learn with the bride,
right, so I often get your wonderful wife, Chaya, to learn with the bride. And the third thing is I try to have discussions with bride and groom about relationships in general,
Mm.
which I think maybe in a way it's like, no, I wouldn't say it's the most important thing, but it's equally important because after all, the wedding's just a wedding. What really matters is what comes later, right? And the rest of the life.
You
So,
know, you remind me, I was speaking to my wife, Chaya's grandmother, a while back, and she got married right after the war. In fact, she was a Holocaust survivor, she was from Hungary, and she met her husband who was from Poland. She was a nurse and he was in hospital after the war, very sick and they met each other and got married. None of them had parents, obviously. And she was describing how they prepared for the wedding. They the night before, her friends came over. Her friends took her to the mikveh. They cooked some fish. And that was pretty much it. They boiled a pot of fish, and that was the wedding. So it's interesting. And they were married for many years and had a beautiful marriage. So it just goes to show, the wedding
no, for sure.
is obviously important, but it's the marriage that matters.
My grandparents got married before the war, but in a shtetl. They got married on a Friday. The reason was because it was common in Israel because they were very poor. They got married on a Friday midday, I guess. The wedding reception, which basically two families coming together for a Shabbat meal.
So you kill two birds with one stone. You have a
Yeah, and
Friday
then
night meal.
Sunday night they would get together with music and some cake and soda, and have dancing and simcha and all that. Yeah,
Yeah,
and they were also married for many, many, many years.
right.
So then
So
also, yes, those are the three things. And then always build a connection. Either I have already a connection with them, or build a connection. And then what we try and do is always, have the whole families, both families over for Shabbat. And I've done also sometimes where I also get the families together for a session so they can understand what's going on, which is really
mm,
beautiful, and people appreciate that. And yeah, it's a whole journey. I prepare them for what the chuppah, what's going to happen, and everything, and then the actual directing traffic on the day. That's only the last part. That's a small part, actually.
that's right. That's what everyone sees. Um, it's interesting. I mean, I've been with you for a few weddings. I've been with you to the opposite of weddings, to funerals. Where do you find yourself getting more emotional at a funeral or at a wedding? Obviously a rabbi has to hold their composure to some degree by both, because you can't have someone who's directing it lose it. But obviously, you're a human being, so you respond emotionally. Where do you find yourself getting more emotional?
So, wow, it's a fascinating question. I didn't see that one coming. I actually think that sometimes when I do get emotional, and as I get older, I'm getting more emotional. Um, it's more by weddings, actually. And I think the reason is this. Obviously, you want to be a support in both cases. You try to connect. You try not just to be doing a job. You try to actually become part of the experience. But I think I see, and I think everyone sees there. I mean, you've done a funeral or two. Um, your role becomes much more supportive role to strengthen, to comfort, to hold everyone else together.
Mm,
And therefore, there is more of a necessity, even if you're very close to the people, to stand strong and to be that. I mean, you have to show empathy, you have to be part of it, you have to really be involved, but really to stand strong and to be a support. Whereas weddings, I'm okay to lose it, it's fine. No one needs support. I mean, they need direction of traffic. They need to know what to do. They need to make sure it's all halachically and spiritually well done. But become emotional there is fine.
right, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Funnily
Uh,
enough, funnily enough, just to mention, and I'm sure this is not just to do with being the officiating rabbi, but I find that the most emotional point of the ceremony is the Badekon for me.
yeah, there's something very special about
It's
it.
something very special about it. And also, if you understand in Kabbalah and Chassidut what it means, it's actually
Yeah,
it's like a very moment of blessing. It's an amazing
yeah,
thing.
no, for sure. For sure. So going back to being an officiating rabbi at a wedding, so a couple comes to you, and let's say they have, let's say they're not as religious and they have sort of other ideas of what they want to do with the chuppah. They want to introduce some new things, or I don't know, for example, we don't have to get into specifics, but for example, as we know, when the chuppah happens, so the bride walks around the groom, they want the groom to walk around the bride, or they want both to walk around each other. But I don't know, for some strange reason, people have this misconception that the bride walking around the groom is about dominance. Anyway, we can give another podcast, spend an hour just explaining the deep spirituality and actually how it actually brings out the greatness of the bride over the groom. But anyway, that's for a different discussion. But for whatever reason, people have their things. How do you deal with that? And how do you deal with that in a compassionate way? Because obviously you don't want to just say this is the way it is and finished, and I'll go find someone else. But on the other hand, you have a standard.
So it's a very yeah. So that's has come up and it's interesting. So first of all, I normally clear a lot of that in the very first session because I want to be honest with people. You need honesty. It's the first thing. You need to be honest what
Mm,
the info, what you can compromise on, what you can't compromise on. There are many things that I'm considered very flexible. Um, I once I once met with a bride and groom who asked me to marry them, and I went to meet with them. Same thing. I always sit down, and then I went through the whole thing, and then the reason I came to them was I didn't even know them that well, but I'd done a few sessions, kayema sessions that we do with young adults, and I talked about very contemporary topics. And I did meditation and things that maybe they weren't so used to. Um, I mean, the other rabbis they do it, but they weren't so used to rabbis doing this kind of stuff. And so at the end, she says, I just want to make sure. She says to me, "You are Orthodox, right?" And I want to say, "You kidding?" Like, because she wanted an Orthodox wedding, shouldn't we? So I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty Orthodox." So having said that, I'm actually, I can do both things. I can be very, very accepting and very flexible, but at the same time, there are things that I will not bend on. I'm very tradition based, and I think that things which are timeless and have been tradition, chuppahs and weddings, throughout generations are very, very important. But I think the way it's dealt with is this. First of all, it's always what people most want. What people want the most is care,
yeah.
care and connection, right? So if you're caring, take them through it. If there's a question, you try to explain it, what the meaning is, explain why this you could be flexible on, this you can't, and so on and so forth. I find is normally very well received. And also how you're going to do it, how you present it. So, for example, I'll give you an example of what's happened, right? Brian Groom came to me and says, "Do we actually have to read the ketubah under the chuppah?" A Chuppa is a document. It's actually a very legal document. It's an ancient document about commitment of the husband to the wife that halachically a woman must have. It's a tradition to read under the chuppah. It's obviously got some spiritual significance and so on, but it's a tradition. And it's in Aramaic. It's Aramaic, which actually many people who know Hebrew don't understand. And yeah, so they kind of think they don't want to disrupt the chuppah, they want it to be meaningful, all kind of stuff. So I said, look, yes, the answer is we do, but I can guarantee you, I said, I know it's long, and I know that it's in Aramaic, but I've done it before a number of times, and I can tell you it'll take very quick. And then normally the comment I get after reading the Chuppa, I always get comments from the crowd, like someone will stop me and say, "Wow, you read that really fast," right? So I understand not everyone appreciates an Aramaic legal document sort of interfering with the wedding journey, with the wedding process. But I explain it nicely. I'm caring, and I explain that it has to be done, and I do it really quickly. I do it really quickly. It's clear. I do every word, but I know that it's not going to be very spiritual and meaningful for people, so I just do it very quickly. But it needs to be done, and I explain why, and so on and so forth. So that's the balance. Look, sometimes I did have a couple that came to me, and I explained to them what I'm prepared to do and not, and they went to a different rabbi, and that's fine. And I was still close with one of the parents of that wedding, and I still went to the wedding, and I'm actually close with them today.
Yeah,
And that's great. I have no problem with that. I'm not, it's perfectly okay.
that's right. Maybe we can actually let's actually go back to that example I brought before. Let's end off with an actual example here, because this is something that actually people have been brought up with me, and I know they brought up with you. Maybe you could just clear the misconception here. Some people think this whole idea of the bride walking around the groom is some sort of idea of like that the groom is being dominant and ruling over. It's like her way of being subservient to the man, and it's sort of like anti-women. And let's if someone comes to you and asks you that, how would you explain it?
Okay, so I would take a lot longer than I'm about to take now because we keep this podcast a bit short, but very, very briefly, it works like this. The chuppah is a very holy time. And it's so holy that we believe that the energy at the chuppah is very similar to the energy that will happen when Mashiach comes, in Messianic times, where the chuppah is also a reflection of the relationship between Jewish people and God. Jewish people are the bride, God is the groom. And we are taught that marriage between God and the Jewish people began at Har Sinai, began at Mount Sinai, and will culminate, become the strongest when Mashiach comes, right? When Mashiach comes, there's a verse in Tanakh that says, Nekeva tesovev gever, that the feminine will surround the masculine. And what it actually means is that we know that we have feminine energy and masculine energy, which everyone has both, by the way, but it does come out in male and female, right? And the way it plays out sometimes in terms of roles is giving and receiving, and sort of the male energy is kind of a giving energy, the female is more of a receiving energy, both critically important, both equal, one's not higher than the other. However, it does say that the source, the origin, the spiritual origin of femininity transcends, like we have in Kabbalah, we have the Sfirot, the 10 powers of creation, the 10 powers of the soul. Malchut is known as the feminine. A few of them are known as feminine, but the Malchut is the ultimate feminine energy, and it comes towards the end and it processes everything and gives birth. It's the whole thing, right? So it's actually a beautiful idea when you understand that. You understand what feminine energy is really about. But it is placed because it needs to affect all of the others, just like Shabbat comes at the end of the week, which is also feminine because it has to process everything in the week and make it holier. So too the feminine energy does that. And that's why the source, although it comes at the end, the source of femininity is actually transcends that of masculinity. Where do we show this? At a chuppah. That when the bride goes around the groom, it's actually showing the transcendence of femininity. It's actually showing the higher spiritual origin of the feminine over the masculine, which will be in full revelation when Mashiach comes.
Right.
So I'm not sure how that shows dominance over the female. I don't think it does
It's
at
the
all.
exact opposite, if anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So
that's great.
and sometimes people understand that they're great. They're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. It's great. We should only have simchas and celebrate more weddings and good things.
By the way, you said I went Sunday to a wedding and I wasn't official. Actually, the way it's nice to be not officiating in a way.
You can
I mean,
enjoy
it's
it more.
beautiful. It's beautiful. I have to say, it's very beautiful to take a bride and groom through the journey.
Yeah.
Especially when you do it as a whole journey, not just showing up for a show. But there's also something very special in going as a guest. So I love both.
That's right. All right, everyone.
I have only simchas and good things.
Amen.
All the best. Bye bye.